Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Malcolm Rifkind. I have been invited to take the session that we're about to begin. Perhaps I can just begin, if I may, just by explaining, insofar as I have a competence to speak on the subject before us, what that competence is. I served for a total of 6 years in the British Foreign Office as Minister of State and then as Foreign Secretary, and was also Defence Secretary. And this was during the governments of Margaret Thatcher and John Major. And in the early session, as a junior minister, as Minister of State, I was responsible under the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary for our relations with the Soviet Union, and was involved in Margaret Thatcher's meeting with Mr. Gorbachev, the famous meeting, when she said, he is a man with whom we can do business. So I was able to see at first hand the chemistry of that meeting and what it then led to. And the subject is the end of history, what happened in 1989 and in the immediate period thereafter. And that phrase, the end of history, wasn't just invented. It was an American academic, Professor Fukuyama, who suggested that so crucial were the events of those years that it really was the end of history, because it was the triumph of the West, the triumph of democracy, and of the values that we have. And the issue that we are discussing this morning, and which others have discussed, is whether that was a wise thing for him to say, or whether the events that we have seen in the last 20 to 30 years suggest not that it wasn't important, but that in some respects we're going back, or have gone back, to the bad old days. So I begin by just emphasizing the significance of what happened in 1989. And it's an extraordinary coincidence that, of course, was 100 years after the fall of the Bastille, which began the French Revolution. So 1989 was not one event, it was actually three historic events, all connected with each other, but all nevertheless distinct in a way that I will explain very briefly. First of all, it was the end of the Cold War. And the Cold War was that geopolitical struggle between the Soviet Union and the West, particularly the United States. And it could at any stage have led from a Cold War to a hot war, a third world war. And if it had done, of course, it would have had the added horror of nuclear weapons, and it would have been the possibility of a nuclear exchange which could have literally destroyed all human life and the planet of which we are part. So the Cold War came to an end. And whatever problems we have with Mr. Putin today, and we have serious problems, they are not of the same order. Because in the case of the Soviet Union, it was at one period the military equal of the United States, which Russia certainly is not. It was economically strong at one stage, which Russia is not. And of course, it had global aspirations, whereas Mr. Putin is more of an opportunist rather than someone seeking to dominate the world. So the end of the Cold War was the first dramatic change. And of course, the Cold War immediately followed the Second World War. And therefore, Europe was beginning to get back to some degree of normality. So I said there were three things that happened. That was the first. The second, simultaneously, but in a different way in terms of the detail, was it was the great end of the ideological struggle between communism and capitalism, between communism and market economics. Because there is no communist society today, with a mild exception of North Korea, but even that is basically a totalitarian despotism. China is still run by a communist party, as is Vietnam and Cuba, but their societies are not communist in any Marxist-Leninist sense. In the case of China, you essentially have state capitalism. And why did communism collapse? Why did it fail? Essentially because it couldn't deliver. Economically, what Mr. Gorbachev, when he came to Britain, most noted was how when he was shown a supermarket, it wasn't a supermarket for the privileged, for the members of the political elite. It had a marvelous, extraordinary display of choice. And this was for ordinary members of the public. Everyone was able to do their shopping in that way. And that was just one example of the failure of communism. Somebody had remarked that communism only worked either in heaven, where they did not need it, or in hell, where they had it already. That might have been a bit unkind, but it summed up what could be described. So communism failed as a system. And of course, what you saw after the 1989 was not just introduction of capitalism and market economics throughout Eastern Europe, and Poland and Hungary, Czech Republic, the Baltic states, but even Russia itself, through the oligarchs. It's not the kind of capitalism that we have in Britain, but it nevertheless is closer to capitalism than it ever was to socialism or communism, and that is something irreversible. So that's the second big change that happened at that time. First, the end of the Cold War. The second, the collapse of communism as an alternative global ideology. And it was global because it had many adherents in other parts of the world. And for many years during the Cold War, the French and Italian communist parties were the largest political parties in France and Italy, although they never got power. Now, I come to the third, and it's the third big change that explains a lot of the problems we are living with at the moment. Because the third dramatic change, the one that was least predicted, even in the sort of timescale we're talking about, was the collapse of Europe's last empire, the Russian Empire. The British Empire had gone gradually over the years, as had the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Belgian, the Dutch, and so forth, all had disappeared. The Russian Empire was the last to go. And I'm not just talking about the end of the Warsaw Pact and countries like Poland and Hungary and so forth becoming free again and becoming essentially Central Europe. I'm actually talking about the implosion of the Soviet Union itself. The state called the Soviet Union, previously Russia, disintegrated into 15 or 16 separate independent countries. Russia was the largest, Ukraine was the second largest, and then you had the Baltic states, the states of the Caucasus, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, the Central Asian states, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, several others, and so forth. So this was something totally unexpected, even to the Russians themselves, but it happened. And of course, the consequence of that is that if, for example, physical war were ever to begin between Russia and the West, it would not begin in the center of Germany, where it would have been up till 1989, with half of Berlin controlled ultimately by the Soviet Union. Russia's borders are now very, very far to the east. They would have to go through Belarus, they'd have to go through the Baltic states or Ukraine before they even got to Poland, and still some way. So from a conventional point of view, Russia no longer can be seen as a threat in the way that the Soviet Union was. Now, Mr. Putin's statement, the most important statement I think he's made, was before he even became president of Russia, when he said that the greatest geopolitical disaster of his lifetime was the collapse of the Soviet state. Because he didn't mean communism, he meant the Russian Empire. And because right from today's borders of Russia, you have to go back to Peter the Great in the 17th century, towards the end of the 17th century, when their borders were as far from the rest of Europe as they are today. And that's why he is determined to limit the independence of Ukraine, if possible, to reabsorb them into the Russian embrace, while he tries to destabilize the Baltic states and so forth. So you had these three massive changes, and there's no doubt that the immediate effect of that in the early 1990s was that communism had disappeared, the Soviet Union was no longer a threat, indeed its leaders, Gorbachev and then Yeltsin, wanted to become closer to the West. And it looked at one stage as if that could lead to Russia as well as Eastern Europe adopting a parliamentary system, the rule of law, becoming more integrated into the European family of nations. So these were pretty impressive things. But what we have saw thereafter, and it didn't take long for it to begin to happen. You started off with the United States becoming the sole superpower. Indeed, so powerful was America that it wasn't just a superpower, it was a super duper power, the only one we actually had, far more powerful than Russia now was. China was not yet as powerful as it is today. And so that looked as if the United States really was a Pax Americana that would determine the fortunes of the world. But that only lasted a few years. I began by quoting Professor Fukuyama, who said it was the end of history. That was rather optimistic. I believe in an alternative phrase, as one door closes, another slams in your face. Because it didn't take long for things to begin happening in Europe that were very, very unpleasant, very, very disagreeable, and which we thought might have gone forever. We got the return of xenophobic nationalism, particularly, for example, in the Balkans, where Yugoslavia collapsed, disintegrated. into half a dozen separate states. And the most serious consequence was the Bosnian, effectively, civil war, when Bosnian Serbs, Bosnian Croats, Bosnian Muslims all fought each other. We had ethnic cleansing for several years. And that was something that Europe thought would never occur, ending with the ghastliness of the Srebrenica massacre. But it wasn't just in Yugoslavia, because also within Russia itself.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.